Academy and stuff of that nature. All right. Okay. Good afternoon. It's Captain John Paul, San Andreas State Police. All right. Welcome to the Academy. Just want to let you know that I want to thank you all for being here. Each and every one of you. I just want to thank you all for being here and ready to take on the journey and the challenge of being law enforcement in this great city. Just want to let you know that the path that you have chosen is not an easy one, but a rewarding one. And a path that is noble, worthy of you, and a path that I think that you all will succeed in. Some of you maybe, most of you hopefully. A path that hopefully you all succeed in and make something of yourselves. I just want to let you know again, I'm Captain John Paul, San Andreas State Police, and I want to welcome you to the Academy. We're going to start off with ethics for professional law enforcement. Law enforcement has traditionally been a pedestal profession. Society generally expects law enforcement personnel to exemplify right and moral conduct. Citizens fail to realize officers are chosen from the general public, that they are just human beings and are subject to all of the human emotions and weaknesses. Although law enforcement community realizes this perception exists, some officers view themselves as being above the law. At times, some officers come to believe that since they deal with situations and people, that society in general does not want to have to address it. They deserve special privileges because of their actions and attitudes. Assaults on law enforcement officers and charges of excessive force have resulted in increased internal investigations and lawsuits against officers over the last decade. In law enforcement, we are now called upon to do more than interpret and enforce criminal law. Not only does the public expect officers to perform professionally, they also expect law enforcement to address issues that in the past would have been considered the job of other social agencies. The ability to make and sound ethical decisions is necessary now more than ever. The term morals and ethics in our daily conversations are used interchangeably. However, the term refers to different things. Morals are principles of right and wrong. Ethics is the discipline of determining good and evil and defining moral duties. The law enforcement officer as a crime fighter versus a public servant. A crime fighter. The crime control model. A. Repression of criminal conduct is the most important function. B. Failure of law enforcement means the breakdown of order. C. Criminal process is the positive garner of social freedom. D. Efficiency is a top priority. E. Emphasis is on speed and finality. F. A conveyor belt is the model for the system. G. There is a presumption of guilt. B. Public servant due process model. A. There is a possibility of error. B. Finality is not a priority. C. There is an instance on prevention and elimination of mistakes. D. Efficiency is rejected if it involves shortcuts. E. The coercive power of the state is always subject to abuse. Law Enforcement Code of Ethics. As a law enforcement officer, my fundamental duty is to serve the community, to safeguard lives and property, to protect the innocent against deception, the weak against oppression or intimidation, and the peaceful against violence or disorder, and to respect the constitutional rights of all to liberty, equality, and justice. I will keep my private life unsullied as an example to all, and will behave in a manner that does not bring discredit to me or my agency. I will maintain courageous calm in the face of danger, scorn, or ridicule, develop self-restraint, and be constantly mindful of the welfare of others. Honest in thought and dead in both in my personal and official life. I will be exemplary in obeying the law and the regulations of my department. Wherever I see or hear a confidential nature or that is confided to me in my official capacity will be kept ever secret unless revelation is necessary in the performance of my duty. I will never act officially or permit personal feelings, prejudices, political beliefs, aspirations, animosities, or friendships to influence my decisions. With no compromise for crime and with relentless prosecution of criminals, I will enforce the law courageously and appropriately, without fear or favor, malice or will, never employing unnecessary force or violence, and never accepting gratuities. I recognize the badge of my office as a symbol of public faith, and I accept it as a public trust to be held as long as I am true to the ethics of the police service. I will never engage in acts of corruption or bribery, nor will I condone such acts by other police officers. I will cooperate with all legal authorized agencies with their representatives in the pursuit of justice. I know that I alone am responsible for my own standard of professional performance and will take every reasonable opportunity to enhance and improve my level of knowledge and competence. I will constantly strive to achieve these objectives and ideals, dedicating myself to God, to my chosen profession, and law enforcement. Beliefs that contribute to the unethical behavior / common rationalities for unethical conduct. A. Loyalty to colleagues comes before anything else. B. The public, or most of it, is the enemy. C. Due process is a barrier to getting the job done. D. Deception and lying is okay if it means getting the bad guy. E. Real policing, crime control is what is important, not garbage calls. F. The public is weak. G. The use of force is justified in the face of my oppression. H. Police officers are victims. We don't get paid much and the public doesn't like us or understand us. I. The public owes us police officers for all we put up with on the streets to serve and protect them. J. Force is the only thing these people understand. K. You don't have to obey the law when you are the law. L. The public thinks every cop is a crook, so why try to be honest? M. There is money out there. If I don't take it, someone else will. N. This guy's a criminal. A beating is what he deserves. Scenario 1. You are on patrol riding one man at approximately 10 p.m. Your vehicle and the other vehicle are stopped at a red light. The light changes and you and the other vehicle start driving. Suddenly you observe the other vehicle weaving from lane to lane. You turn on your lights and sirens, and after about an 8-block drive, the vehicle finally pulls over. You exit your vehicle and find that not only is the driver very intoxicated, but he is your first cousin. What do you do? Invisible individuals in this room, what do you do? What do you do? What you do in that scenario is that basically you continue to act out your official duties as if that individual is not your family member. But also what you would do is you would call for another officer to come to the scene to take over that scene, to remove you from that scene due to the close relationship that you have with that individual and with that individual being your family member. So that when it comes to court and prosecution, no defense attorney or no prosecutor will say that you let your bias or any type of family affair get in the way of you acting out your official duties. But what you would generally do in that situation is you will call for another officer to basically come to that scene and carry out that scene. If no other officer are available to do that, to take over and carry out that scene, you shall continue to act out on your official duties as that individual, as that individual is not your family member and stuff like that. You don't give anyone special treatments, and you don't, do something any different than you would do to someone who's not your family member. You will still carry out your duties as entrusted in you, and you would hold that individual to the full extent of the law and justice. Scenario 2. You and your partner are dispatched to a large jewelry store where an alarm is going off. You arrive and determine that the jewelry store has been burglarized. Your partner insists on doing the report and listing the items that were taken from the store. A couple of days later, you see him wearing the items, showing them off. He claims he's gotten them from a good deal. Several of the items you saw sitting in the store that was burglarized. What would you do? So this is basically a moral and integrity question. What would you do, invisible people in this room? What you would do in that scenario is that you would notify another supervisor or someone higher than you and let them know what's happened and what you saw. What I personally would do in that situation is, before I notify a supervisor, I would go talk to that individual first and confront him. and basically make him see reason. Like, hey man, what you doing is not right. I know where you got this jewelry from and stuff like that. We gotta be, we're better than this. We have to be better than this. This is what the public expects us to do. And you have to basically put it to him and say, hey, look, you need to tell somebody what you did. You know, because if you don't, I will. You know, you basically will put the ball in his court. And if he doesn't want to follow instructions or doesn't want to, you know, do the right thing, then that's where you step in and you make him do the right thing. Not only do you have to be accountable for yourselves in this law enforcement, in this city, whether you're MRPD, whether you're BCSO, rather a state police, no matter what department, marshal service, no matter what department you work for, not only are you accountable for yourself, but you have to be accountable for other people as well. You know, because we hold ourselves to a higher standard in this city. Scenario 3. You and another undercover officer in a downtown district are engaged in a crackdown on organized street solicitation for prostitution. Efforts are focused on organized prostitution on the street. You are accosted by a young woman who offers you sex for money. She said her pussy good. When you attempt to arrest the woman, she attacks you, hitting the undercover officer across the face. After she is subdued, she breaks down and starts crying. She says that she is a heroin addict. Her boyfriend got her hooked and her parents threw her out. She is homeless and cannot keep a job because of her addiction. She does say that her parents have agreed to pay for her to attend a private rehabilitation clinic, and she is booked in for the following weeks. Her ID shows that she is 16, which means she is young, but subject to prostitution as an adult. What do you do? In that situation, you show compassion. You know, you do the best you can to comfort this young woman, knowing that she did something wrong and that she has to pay for. As an officer, we might get a lot of flack, but we care about the people in our community, and we care about, other just anyone in general. In that situation, you would still act out your duties. You would still take her into custody, and you would still charge her with those crimes. But you in this scenario would go above and beyond the call of duty. You would reach out to her parents and her guardians and loved ones, and to verify that she is going to that rehabilitation clinic, and also verify and make sure that she makes that clinic so she can get the help that she needs and stuff like that. We don't always have to be the hammer, but sometimes we can always be the cushion. We don't always have to be the sun in other people's lives, but we can always be the moon so we can shine on individuals in their darkest hours. Moving on. Scenario 4. You are a uniformed police officer in an under-resourced high crime area where officers are on night shift are particularly appreciative of the friendly service and free coffee and food provided by Teddy's shop. Having been robbed twice in the past, Ted is appreciative of the regular police presence he received. One night at 3:30 a.m., you pull Ted over for running a red light. You are a regular at Ted's shop, and you have developed a good relationship with Ted. Ted apologizes for the traffic breach and says, hey, you're not going to give your old mate here a ticket for a little, for a little thing like this. What would you do? You know what I'm saying? Friend broke a rule, he broke a law and stuff like that. What would you do? In this situation, what you would do is you use your officer discretion. I look at it as totality of the circumstances. It's not a big rule break. It's not that bad. You would give Ted a break if you like that coffee. But if Ted is a repeated offender, has a large amount of history of doing this, then you would not give Ted a break. Everything is subjective. As a law enforcement officer in this city, you have to be confident in the performance of your duties. And also you have to be confident in whatever decision you make. If you want to give Ted a ticket, you can give Ted a ticket. If you want to give Ted a break, you can give Ted a break. No one here, no one in your command will tell you how you will in your decision to handle a situation. It is up to you. It is your decision. So you take a hold of that decision. And that goes no matter what you do. If you pull someone over for a traffic offense, you can, if you want to give them a ticket, you can give them a ticket. You want to give them a break, you can give them a break. There are things that you have to do. Like, if you see witness a crime, that's felony or a serious misdemeanor in nature, you have to take action. You have to take that individual into custody. As I always say, your officer discretion ends where your liability begins. If you see someone kill someone, you're not going to give him officer discretion, because letting that person go, other people and other lives could be endangered by your actions. And what we say to officers like that don't take action when someone else and putting someone else's lives in danger? We say that you're a piece of shit, and this city doesn't need you, and we'll let those welfare cities feed you. Okay? That's all I gotta say about that. Criminal law. Moving on. Law enforcement officers enforce the laws of their municipality, county, state, or even federal when permitted. All law enforcement officers should have an in-depth understanding of what makes a person guilty of a crime, and if they have evidence to prove guilt. When charging someone with a crime, it must be understood that this is a description of the crime as provided by legislation, penal code, or statute is comprehended by the charging officer. Officers, if confused or unsure, should contact their colleagues, superiors, or employees of the state justice system for clarification when necessary. So this is all saying that, look, if you charging someone with a crime, or you're taking someone into custody for a crime that they committed, if you don't know what the crime is, call a supervisor, call a senior officer, and refer to your penal code to get the right charge. Always be right when you're charging someone. Never be wrong, because you can get sued. It should be understood that the severity of the crime changes the presence of proof. For example, body camera footage of someone running a red light might be enough to give them a ticket, but body camera footage of a triple homicide might be supplemented with DNA, ballistics, fingerprints, and further forensics. When charging an individual with a crime, the officer must have probable cause of the offense that the suspect committed the offense. Probable cause is explained in constitutional law, but is simply a standard of proof. In cases where serious felony will result in serious punishment, officers are expected to have evidence that is even considered over probable cause. Whenever a ticket is issued or an arrest is made, a report must be filed. Alright. Arrests, searches, and constitutional law. The United States Constitution guarantees citizens various rights and freedoms, and provides them certain protections in their dealings with the government. Because of the Constitution and various amendments discussed in this material, the government is limited in its ability to restrict a citizen's freedom of speech. Citizens are protected against unreasonable searches and seizures by the government agents. The citizens cannot be forced to incriminate themselves in a criminal proceeding. These are just a few of the many freedoms and protections afforded citizens by our Constitution. San Andreas has laws and legislation which requires these protections and some others to be upheld by all law enforcement officers of their agents. Failure to do so may lead to adverse consequences for the law enforcement officer who engages in the illegal conduct, including criminal prosecution, civil liability, suppression of evidence recovered from the suspect, and department discipline. Furthermore, the citizens whom you are sworn to protect and serve deserve to have their rights respected and honored. Our judicial system has several sources of law, the first of that being constitutional law. The law of the land is the United States Constitution. This document sets forth the fundamental principles for government, including grants and limitation of power. Constitutional provisions have greater preeminence or border in the application and concern more fundamental issues of law enforcement than statutes enacted by the legislation branch of government or rules created by the decisions of the judicial branch. Thus, it is said that constitutional law is the supreme law of the land. All other laws must comply with the basic constitutional provisions. Constitutional law is more than just a written document. It also includes judicial interpretations of the Constitution, which are set forth in judicial decisions. Written laws enacted by the legislative branch of the state or federal governments are called statutes. This is the next source of law and precedents after constitutional law. Statutory law declares, commands, or prohibits something. Courts interpreted the meaning of the statutes. Written laws of the local governments are called ordinances. The last source of law is common law. Common law is judge-made law. Judicial decisions may establish rules and principles where legislative have not enacted statutes, or where a statute needs clarification or interpretation. Common law is frequently referred to as case law. The Constitution grants for procedural safeguards to persons accused of crimes. Bills of Attainder. Article 1, Section 9 and 10 prohibits Congress and the states from enacting bills of attainder. A bill of attainder is a special act of the legislature inflicting punishment on a person without conviction through judicial proceeding. The legislature improperly acts as court and prolongs the guilt of a person without any common forms, procedure, or safeguards of a trial. Ex post facto laws. Article 1, Section 9 and 10 prohibit the enactment of ex post facto laws. Such laws are illegal because they attempt to make certain conduct illegal after fact. This position prohibits any law which makes criminal an act which was innocent when done, or which inflicts a greater punishment than allowed at the time of the prohibited action. Bill of Rights. The first 10 amendments of the Constitution are called the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights was written to protect certain guarantees or community citizens felt were fundamental and not subject to change. The First Amendment. The First Amendment established the right that we consider basic in free society. These rights are freedom of religion, speech, press, and assembly and petition. Religion. Congress cannot make any law concerning the establishment of religion or prohibit the free exercise of religion. These two clauses prevent the federal government from establishing a national church, requiring support by taxation or form of intruding on personal religious beliefs. Speech. The First Amendment protections for speech and press are directed towards the right to criticize and publish freely. When First Amendment rights are not absolute, they are subject to reasonable time, place, and manner limitations by the federal and state state government. The amendment bars most prior restraint of expression and punishment of all but narrow range of expression. Restrictions on free speech. Certain methods of communication may conflict with the goals or values of the society. For example, mass pickets, street rallies, marches, and demonstrations can cause serious traffic problems, elevate noise levels, and inconvenience other citizens and provoke riots. The government may require compliance with reasonable time and place restrictions by citizens who use public areas. The Constitution does not give everyone a unified right to speak out on any conceivable subject at all times and places. Falsely shouting fire in a crowded theater or auditorium with the likely result of causing panic is not protected. The following types of speech have no First Amendment protection and thus may be barred by the government. Before I continue, let me go over here and get a drink. Remember to stay hydrated as you're on duty. You do not want to pass out and be vulnerable to attack by someone or a unwilling subject. Stay hydrated, remember. So, obscuracy. Obscuracy is deception of sexual conduct that, taken as a whole by an average person applying complementary community standards, appeals to the prurient interest in sex, portrays sex in a patiently offensive way, and does not have serious literacy, artistry, political, or scientific value. So, obscenity. So it's basically said that your right to free speech is not protected under obscenity. If you're talking about sex and doing all kinds of crazy shit, that's not protected under the First Amendment. Fighting words. Words addressed to an ordinary citizen, which are intended and are likely to incite immediate physical retaliation, are not protected by the First Amendment. So you can't talk shit and get your ass knocked out and cite, First Amendment. It's not how that works. Threats, which are utterances calculated to intimidate, provide no social benefit. The threat must be genuine, and the person making the threat must be reasonably capable of carrying out the threat, to lose the First Amendment protection. Incendiary speech. Incendiary speech advocates the immediate violent use of force against the government. Protests against the government are, of course, lawful unless and until the speaker encourages protests to engage in violent, lawless action, and such lawless is likely to occur. Press. First Amendment protects the right to gather and receive information. Members of the organized press often assert this right. However, the press has no more right to access to information than the individual citizen, and that the government may lawfully limit access to information in certain circumstances. Assembly and petition. The First Amendment protects the right to peacefully assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances. The Second Amendment. The Second Amendment states that the Constitution shall not infringe on the right for people to keep and bear arms. It was intended to protect the individual's right to possess personal firearms for lawful purposes. Third Amendment. Third Amendment prevents the quarteling of troops in private homes without legal approved procedures. The Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable search and seizures by the government. Exemplary rule. The United States Supreme Court created the exemplary rule to enforce the Fourth Amendment's prohibiting against unreasonable searches and seizures. That exemplary rule makes any evidence attained by the government through an illegal, unreasonable search and seizure inadmissible in court. Mapp versus Ohio, 1961. The Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment specifies the right of persons accused of crimes and thus has a special significance for law enforcement officers. There are 5 different propositions in this amendment, but this block of instruction will examine the double jeopardy, self-incrimination, and due process clause. Double jeopardy. The provision against double jeopardy protects an individual against hazards and pressures of repeated trials and possible conviction for the same offense. Jeopardy is the danger of conviction and punishment when an accused is placed on trial in a criminal action. There is no protection against double jeopardy in a civil action. In a jury trial, jeopardy attaches when the court, where was I at? Yep, this happens sometime. Yep, so okay, so there's no protection against double jeopardy in a civil action. In a jury trial, jeopardy attaches when a court impaneled swears in a jury. In non-jury trials, jeopardy attaches when the first witness is sworn. When the same conduct violates the law of 2 states or of the state and federal government, each of the sovereign entities may separately try and punish for various, violations of the law and stuff like that. So it basically means that you can't be charged with the same crime twice unless it occurs in 2 different jurisdictions. Self-incrimination. This provision preserves the common law rule that state cannot compel a person to furnish statements against oneself. This protects a witness against dangers of giving false testimony that leads to infliction of criminal penalties. The right to silence attaches when a person who is in custody is interrogated by law enforcement. Persons may waive this right after they are notified of their law. Basically, they have to notify their rights under the United States Supreme case, Miranda versus Arizona. The remedy for such government compelled of self-incrimination is that a compelled statement may not be used in any criminal action. The United States Supreme Court has also ruled that in addition to the right not to speak, an accused has the right to the presence of counsel during custodial interrogations. Miranda rights must be advised only when the suspect is in custody and when they are being asked guilt-seeking questions. Due process. The Fifth Amendment, the Due Process Clause, applies not only to the federal government, not the states. Therefore, the due process officers must be concerned with is found in the Fourth Amendment. The concept remains the same, even though the amendment number may be different. The Supreme Court defined the due process as a system of rights based on moral principles so deeply embedded in the traditions and feelings of our people as to be deemed fundamentally to civilized society. Due process is which comports with the deepest notions of what is fair and right and just. The Sixth Amendment. Sixth Amendment gives an accused certain fundamental rights in a criminal prosecution. It grants the right to a speedy and public trial and information and the nature and the clauses of the accused, to confront the witnesses against him, to conspiracy process for attaining witnesses in his favor, and to the assistance of counsel for the offense. The Seventh Amendment. The Seventh Amendment preserves the right of a trial by jury in civil cases. This provides for the trial by 12 people under the supervision of a judge who instructs them on the law, advises them on the facts, and sets aside their verdict if it is against the law or the evidence. The Eighth Amendment. The Eighth Amendment protects people from excessive bail, excessive fines, and cruel and unusual punishment. This amendment preserves the basic concept and dignity of many, assuring that the power to impose punishment is exercised by the state in a lawful manner. The Ninth Amendment. The history of the Ninth Amendment reveals the beliefs of the farmers from our Constitution, and that there are additionally fundamental rights not listed in the first 8 amendments, which are protected from government infringement. These additional rights include the right of privacy in marriage, the right of interstate travel, and right to participate in political activities. The 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment preserves the right not granted by the United States government to the states or the people. Some people reserved for the state are laws, regulating marriage, educational systems, corporate charters, voting qualifications, and police powers. 14th Amendment. 2 of the 3 key phrases in the 14th Amendment affect the government's law enforcement function: due process of the law and equal protection of the law. Due process. The Due Process Clause is used to protect the rights of citizens against infringement by states. This clause extends to the same protection against arbitrary state legislation affecting life, liberty, and property as is offended by the Fifth Amendment Due Process Clause against the federal legislation. Due process requires that the defendant receive an adequate notice of the offense charged. Due process requires certain basic grievances, a fair trial, as such, a right to counsel, a right to a speedy and public trial, a right to be free from the use of unlawful seized evidence and unlawfully obtained confessions. A defendant may be entitled to a plea bargain by entering a guilty plea to obtain a less severe sentence. However, a plea must be voluntary, knowingly, and understood. Due process requires the state to prove the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Due process requires that a convicted prisoner be sane and competent prior to being executed. Equal protection. This proposition requires equal protection of the law. It applies that the government actions only, not private conduct. It requires that the government to apply its laws equally. Exclusion of the identifiable racial or ethnic group from the grand jury, petit jury, and example, denial of equal protection of the laws. By applying the Bill of Rights to the state, the United States Supreme Court generally enlarges the powers of the federal courts. State officers must protect both state and federal individual rights. For this instance, it is extremely important that the law enforcement officers stay informed on both state and federal court decisions that affect criminal justice. Remember, law enforcement is designed to protect our constitutional rights as citizens, as well as to protect the society as a whole. Insufficient comprehension of the application of the rules described hereout can lead to an adverse consequences for officers and citizens alike. Miranda versus Arizona requires to warn of the right to silence and counsel before interrogation of a person in custody. Mapp versus Ohio, exemplary rule. Terry versus Ohio, stop and frisk. Delaware versus Bruce, prohibiting random vehicle stops. Standards of proof. Probable cause. Probable cause is a requirement found in the Fourth Amendment that must usually be met before police make an arrest, conduct a search, or receive a warrant. Courts usually find probable cause when there is reasonable basis for believing that a crime may have been committed for an arrest, or when evidence of a crime is present and placed to be searched for a search. Under exigent circumstances, probable cause can justify a warrantless search or seizure. All right. Probable cause for arrest exists when facts and circumstances within the police officer's knowledge would lead to a reasonable person to believe that the subject has committed, is committing, or is about to commit a crime. Probable cause must come from specific facts and circumstances rather just simply from an officer's hunch or suspicion. Probable cause to search exists when facts and circumstances known to the officers provide basic for the reasonable person to believe that a crime was committed at the place to be searched, or that the evidence of crime exists at the location. Reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion is a standard used in criminal procedure. Reasonable suspicion is used in determining the legality of a police officer's decision to perform a search. It is an objectively justified suspicion that is based on specific facts or circumstances. Reasonable suspicion is a minimum level of objective justification. When an officer stops someone to search the person, courts require that the officer has either a search warrant, probable cause to search, or reasonable suspicion to search. In descending order of which gives an officer the broadest authority to perform a search, courts have found that the order is search warrant, probable cause, and then reasonable suspicion. A reasonable suspicion is more than a hunch. Voluntary encounters and investigative stops and arrests. The Fourth Amendment requires that searches and seizures be reasonable. If officers are not conducting the search or seizure, then the Fourth Amendment requirements do not apply. It is important for officers to know when their conduct is regulated by the requirements of the Fourth Amendment. A person has been seized when, under the circumstances, a reasonable person in that position would not feel free to leave, walk, or drive away from the law enforcement officer. Florida versus Rayner. A person is seized to the point that he submits to an officer's command to stop, or when he is stopped, physically restrained by an officer. California versus Harnaga. A search can also occur when a reasonable person in the suspect's position would not feel free to terminate an encounter with a law enforcement officer. Florida v. Bostic. The test for whether a person is seized is an objective one. Would a reasonable person in that suspect's position feel that the officer deprived his freedoms of movement? The chase of a suspect, for example, is not a seizure until the suspect stops or is stopped. Thus, any property thrown away by the suspect during the chase is admissible in court, even if the officer has no reason to chase in the first place. Note, officers should not attempt to seize a suspect without legal justification to do so. California versus Harnaga. A person is arrested either when he is told he is under arrest by an officer or when a person's freedom of movement has been significantly deprived. The more intrusive the government conducts, the more proof of criminal activity is required in order for the reasonable standard of the Fourth Amendment to be met. For example, more proof of a crime is needed to arrest a person, probable cause, than to merely detain him for a few minutes to investigate a possible crime. Only reasonable suspicion is needed to detain. Not all police contacts with civilians are seizures. Law enforcement frequently involves contact short of a seizure when no justification for police action is required. Since the Fourth Amendment is not implicit, such encounters are known as voluntary encounters or consensual encounters. When an officer begins to investigate a crime, the encounter with the citizen can become more intrusive, such that a reasonable person in the suspect's portion would not feel free to leave or terminate the encounter with the police, which would be a seizure. The officer must meet some level of legal standard to justify the restriction of a civilian's liberty. Seizures occur when a law enforcement officer applies physical force to a suspect, issues a show of authority, commands to stop activities, blue lights and sirens, and the suspect submits to the show of authority. A seizure also occurs when an officer's conduct would have communicated to a reasonable person that he is not at liberty to ignore a police officer's presence and to go about his business. If a police officer seizes a suspect, the officer must meet the legal requirements by the Fourth Amendment for the seizure to be lawful. Officers must become familiar with the objective factors that justify seizures of any type of person, whether it is an investigative stop requiring reasonable suspicion or full custodial arrest requiring probable cause. The following list contains numerous factors that the courts have considered in determining whether a seizure is objectively justified and thus reasonable under the Fourth Amendment. This list is useful as a guide. However, this list is not complete. If an officer is free to use any observation or factor that is in his training and expertise raises suspicion of criminal activity. Officers' observation in the light of training and experience, information received from other officers or citizens, time of the day or night, rather area is a high crime area, proximity to a crime, or whether the subject is a stranger to an area, reaction to an officer, including flight, officer's knowledge of the suspect's prior criminal activity or record, flight from the scene, or actions matching the profile of criminal behavior. In arrest, An arrest is a more basically invasive or intrusive seizure of a person's liberty. More proof is required to justify an arrest. An arrest is a seizure for the purpose of initiating a criminal prosecution. An arrest is complete when a suspect submits to the control of an arresting officer who has indicated his intention to arrest, or arresting officer with the intention to make an arrest takes a person into custody by the use of physical force. Since the purpose of an arrest is much different than the investigative stop, officers may move a suspect against his will, restrain a suspect, transport a suspect, and search a suspect during the arrest process. Unlike an investigative stop, an officer may not interrogate a suspect without, reading remander or obtaining a valid waiver. When making an arrest, you must identify yourself as an officer, unless already apparent, and notify the suspect they are under arrest and state the reason for the arrest. A search can only be conducted when an officer has probable cause that there is evidence within a location. Typically, an officer should apply for a search warrant before acting upon the search. This protects the officer in his actions and creates no difficulties. There are exceptions what permits a warrantless search. If exigent circumstances apply, an officer may enter the property to search for an item. Exigent circumstances generally mean that if an officer does not act immediately, the evidence will be destroyed. Factors of exigent circumstances include hot pursuit of a suspect, dangers to the public of the law enforcement officers outside or inside the dwelling if an immediate warrantless entry is made, the need to prevent the imminent destruction of evidence, the need to prevent the suspect's escape, whether the suspect is armed, and also the gravity of the offense. So you don't need a warrant. So this goes over exigent circumstances when it comes to like a search and stuff like that. So if someone shoots someone and runs into their house, you can enter their house to take them into custody without a warrant because of the totality of the circumstances and the level of crime they committed. Now, if they committed a misdemeanor and they run into their house, you need a search warrant to actually go into their home to take them into custody, because that's not exigency because of the level of crime they committed. A frisk. A frisk can be conducted when an officer has reasonable suspicion that a person is about to commit a crime, or is armed. Typically, if the crime which the officer suspects is a violent one, such as robbery, that is enough to perform a frisk. A frisk is a pat down of the outer clothing only. Examining for weapons, thus, is permitted by the U.S. Supreme Court case Terry v. Ohio that was previously detailed. It is an effort of officer safety and nothing more. Items located in pockets should not be grabbed, felt, to examine further what it might be. A warrant is a court order which permits an arrest or search. These documents are a petition for a law enforcement officer to justify to a judicial official. An officer must have probable cause for a crime being committed by the offender, or that the evidence is located in the location, for the search warrant. So if you get a call for shots fired, you arrive on scene, you see an individual, you can stop and detain him and do GSR tests on that individual. If the GSR test is positive, then you can pat him down for weapons. If the weapon is an illegal weapon, then you can take him into custody. If the GSR test is positive and the weapon is a legal weapon, then you'll still be taking him into custody for reckless handling of a firearm, because that's what happened. You know what I mean? If you receive a shots fired call, you respond to the area, you locate someone like within the vicinity and stuff like that, you GSR test, you pat them down. That's how you do it. Alright. No taking in reports. Taking reports and writing reports are absolutely critical to any law enforcement officer investigation. Notes are to aid and remind officers when doing investigations, and reports aid in informing prosecution where items are brought under scrutiny by supervisors. So whenever you take an arrest or do anything, you have to report it. If you freaking issue a fucking citation, you shall flex your K muscle, right? Go to incidents and you shall document that you did this. Okay? You have to. Alright? Use of force and subject control. During the course of normal duties, law enforcement officers encounter from time to time various levels of suspect and offender resistance, right? Basically, what that means is that basically we in the city we act on a ass tail make policy, right? So when dealing with the public, officers should express absolute professionalism and key communication skills so that their orders and directions are well understood and perceived with authority. When interacting with an individual and where the legal authority applies, officers may act on the ass tail make model. When enforcing this model, patience is key, and officers should be patient enough so that they are seen as professional but not lose control of the suspect. When giving a lawful command to perform, well, actually, where appropriate, it should be addressed politely and courageously. Asking someone to perform a lawful action once or maybe twice. Once the officer feels that they have exhausted their questions and the suspect is not complying and telling them to go fuck yourself, that's when you ass tail make. For example, if you're out there on the street, you got a traffic stop, something goes wrong during the traffic stop, you wish to take them to jail, they commit a crime that's level that you take them to jail, you're going to ask them to step out of the vehicle. Sir, can you please step out of your vehicle? He's like, fuck you, you can go shove a dick in your ass or something. Alright, so this is when you'll tell them, hey, step out of your vehicle. You need to step out of your vehicle, right? And they still like, fuck you, we're not doing it, right? Alright, then the third thing is, basically you will tell them to get out of their vehicle, and you'll tell them what you'll do if they don't get out. So hey, I'm telling you, I'm giving you a lawful order, step out of your vehicle. If you don't, I will remove you from that vehicle. And if they're still like fuck you, then you make them, right? So you tase that motherfucker out the vehicle. You know what I mean? That's what you do. Pull your taser out. Sir, step out of this vehicle right now or I'm gonna tase you. And they're like fuck you, then you tase their ass, okay? And you get them out the vehicle and you take them into custody. Alright? If you tell someone to leave, right, a certain property, and they won't leave and stuff like that, then you will make them leave. You will basically detain them and escort them off the property and undetain them. If they come back into the property area, then they'll be placed under arrest for trespassing. But it's an ass tail make around here. And that basically concludes the academy reading. Alright, now we are to head to the airport and where we will do some driving training scenarios. We will go over traffic stops. We will go over radio etiquette, how to talk on the radio. We will go over pit maneuvers and other things of that nature. And hopefully after this training, you all become full-fledged officers of MRPD. The way it works in this city is that all new officers going through training will start out at MRPD at the discretion of the Chief of Police. His name is Jay West. We have other agencies in the city. The other agency in the city is BCSO. BCSO is run by Sheriff Eric Stivers, Alpha 1. Alpha 1 is Sheriff Eric Stivers, and he runs BCSO. The only way to get to BCSO at this time is that you have to go through MRPD. You have to serve time at MRPD through a probationary period and get through field training. Once you're out of your probationary period, you can ask for a transfer through your Chief of Police at MRPD. His name is Jay West, badge number Lincoln 100. You ask for a transfer from him, and with his approval, you can basically petition BCSO to take you on at their department. That's the process to getting to BCSO. State Police, San Andreas State Police, is a very prestigious department that hold ourselves to a higher standard. The higher standard not only provides that we pay the most, but not only do we hold ourselves accountable, but we also run and hold accountable other departments in the city and stuff like that. To get to the San Andreas State Police Department, you have to serve a minimum of 3 months in law enforcement in this city. But there's an exception to the rule that if you have served less than 3 months in the city, you can apply to the state police by talking to the command member of the San Andreas State Police Department, and that command member will go over it with the other command members to feel that if you're worthy enough to become state police material. If we feel that you are state police material, then Captain Bob Leonard with the San Andreas State Police Department, and the Assistant Commissioner Jake Harrison, 1902. Bob Leonard's badge number is also 1903. 1903 and 1902, Bob Leonard and Jake Harrison, they will come together and they will give you a test. The test is 20 to 30 questions. The test is not hard, but it's not easy and will take a considerable amount of time. You have to put as much detail into your answers as humanly possible. It is not a multiple choice test, and it is all drawn out answers. So you have to use all the knowledge and everything you have learned so far in law enforcement in this city and put it all together to do well on this test. If you do well on this test, then you'll be given an interview. The interview will be with Assistant Commissioner Jake Harrison, 1902, and it will be with Bob Leonard, 1903. And they will talk to you and give you an interview. And if you do well in that interview and do well on your test, then you could possibly be offered a position with the San Andreas State Police Department. That is how to get to the San Andreas State Police Department. The United States Marshal Service, they have their own rules and regulations. They are sort of a invite-only type of department where that they aren't hiring, and if they are hiring, they're not hiring often. So I don't really know their process of getting on with their department, but you know, that's something that you'll find out. Don't worry, when they want you, they'll find you and you'll get there. That's all you have to know about. All right, well, thank you for suffering through my reading at the Academy with me, all you individuals. I just want to show a clap of hands that you all made it through this far. Once I get to my clap emote, see where that is. Oh yeah, there we go. There we go, everyone. Good job. Good job. You survived. And if you're in your head, you're fucking fired. Thank you. Have a great day. And thank you for coming to this academy. Be safe. God bless. And I wish you the best in all your future endeavors in this city, in law enforcement and beyond. I love you. And this has been Captain John Paul, San Andreas State Police. And you all be safe. Over and out.